our next guest is someone that I've known for several years. I haven't seen him in a while. I believe the last time I actually saw him, either physically or virtually, was at the National Black Book Festival, but it was like 10 or more years ago. So, but he's an author. He's been around a while. He's also a health enthusiast, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his health journey. And he has a new book out, and he does some other stuff too. So, Earl Sewell, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We hear you great.
Well, then good. We're cooking with gas. Good evening. How are you?
Doing great. We're doing wonderful. And
That's
how
one.
how have you been since it was about 20, maybe 2012 or 13 last time when you came to Houston,
Oh yeah,
wasn't it?
it's been a while. But
Mhm.
I'm not aging, so I'm only going to say, I did not age that, 12 or 13 years or so. So, I'm still 32. That's my
Well,
story. I'm sticking to
But
it.
the good part is that you can say that and people will believe you because you really do look like you're 32.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because I'm trying to slow Father Time down, just a little bit
just
because,
a little. We can't
yeah, because,
stop it, but we can slow it down.
yeah, because,
Eating
he got,
right and being active and
right.
keeping our minds active. Those are the main three things to because if you don't stay active, if you don't eat right, that's where it starts. And that means something green every day. So something green every
Yes.
day. And stay active, then as you get older, you know your joints and your bones and all of that stuff, it
I
starts
know
to
the
stiffen
feeling.
up on you, your back and your neck and your if you don't move these parts, they get
The more
stiff.
you talk, the more my back hurts. So stop.
Yeah, you don't want those things, those aches to show up prematurely. And I know that I work hard to fight against that. And I share my journey with, people who have read my work and who've been following me for a while. But just to recap, if I may, is that okay?
Yes, yes, I was going to ask you about your journey with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, so I was going along, living my author life, living my corporate life, living the American dream, doing what I was, doing. I was driving down the highway one day and I blinked and I suddenly could not see.
Mm.
Yeah, that's how serious it was. And eventually, I thought I had an eyelash or something in my eye. You know how you think you got something in your eye and you're just like, oh, I just need to clear it out. Well, I was rubbing and rubbing, blinking and blinking, and my vision wasn't coming back. Eventually, I did the man
Wow.
thing. I will tell you that. When my vision did come back, I was talking to my aunt, my mom's sister, and she was saying, "Oh, go to the doctor." I said, "Oh no, it was just a fluke. It just, I was doing the man thing. I'm all right. I don't want to go see a doctor." Anyway, I go see it. She convinced me to go see the doctor, and that's when he told me you have sudden onset of type 2 diabetes. And I was
Mm.
like, no, I don't. Because I was in denial. I said, no, I don't. He said, yes, you do. I said, no, I don't. He he said, yes, you do. And he went on, he says, that's what took your eyesight. And he says, if you don't get your blood sugars down, you're at higher risk for blindness, amputation, heart failure, stroke. He went down the list, and I looked at the guy and I said, I was like, that doesn't sound good. And he says, here, take this pill and stop eating sugar. And I was like, what's that? Anyway, the longest story of it is I decided that the medication kept making me sick, because those side effects that come with medications.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to, as a writer, I always do research. So I decided, well, let me go and do research on this to see what is, because he was treating symptoms and I wanted to get to root cause.
Right. You
Right.
wanted a cure. You didn't just
Yeah,
want
yeah, yeah. I was like, I don't,
ongoing treatment.
yeah, I was like, I don't want to take this the rest of my life. I want the cure for it. So
Right.
anyway, so I went on this journey of learning, like the root cause of type 2 diabetes, And it was diet and lifestyle. It was the processed foods. It was the sugars. It was the, sitting on my John Henry hind parts a little too long because I'm a writer. So that's what I do. I sit on my John Henry hind parts and I sit here and I eat and I snack and I eat and I snack and I write. So eventually what I did is at the time I weighed about 250 pounds, maybe a little bit more.
Now I
I was
didn't meet you then. When I met you, you weren't at 250.
No, I wasn't up there, but life happens. I had to become a caregiver for a parent, and that will put some stress and some weight on you.
Right.
Okay.
So it was during that time that I became a caregiver that I put on a lot of emotional weight, I will say. You know.
Okay.
So but anyway,
Mm-hmm.
Well, looking back, what what do you think? Were there certain things that were going on that may have been signs of the diabetes? Like for instance, were you drowsy? Was there a weight gain to it? Gassiness. Was there anything that now that you're looking back, like wow, that was a sign?
yeah, well, see, I didn't know the signs. I didn't know the sign. The frequent urination was a sign. I just thought it was just a sign of, me getting older, having to go to the bathroom all the time. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but that's what I had, and I was always thirsty. But I figured,
Yeah,
I'm drinking
I heard
Gatorade, I'm
that.
drinking more and more sugar, and my body's saying, no, we can't have any more sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those were the signs, and so I wasn't really paying attention until my body says, okay, you're blind now. Can you hear me now? And I,
Mm,
and I was like, yes, I can hear you now. I cannot see. This isn't going to work. So anyway, I did my due diligence. I learned as much as I could. I had another friend that was an internal medicine doctor, and she was doing functional medicine. So I worked with her. And eventually, what I did is I got down to where I am now, about 185. And so I have not been this lean since, I was a teenager. I mean, I went from a 44-inch waist down to a 32-inch waist. And let me tell you, it's a difference. It's a huge difference.
I bet.
Uh, and so I changed my diet, I changed my lifestyle, I changed everything. I overhauled my life completely. I gave up the processed foods, I gave up the sugars, I gave it up all, and I went vegan. And when I went back to my practitioner, he says, "You're not the typical diabetic patient." And I said, "Dude, I'm not trying to be your diabetic patient. I'm trying to be your healthy patient. Like, who said that I want to be your diabetic patient? Like, what did they like?
Like
Right
permanently.
Right. And like,
Mhm.
what's the plus in that? What's the benefit of that? It's like, well,
right,
the
right.
benefit is your pockets. That's what that benefit is. And so, I didn't want to be his diabetic patient. I wanted to be his healthy patient. But then what I ended up learning, as we all know, there's no money to be made off of healthy people.
Right.
Because
Right.
if you are a healthy, functional individual, well, they're not, why would I put a pharmaceutical in my body if it's functioning?
Right.
So that was the difference. And so the last of it is I was blogging my journey to say that I was going to lose this and I was going to reverse this, and it got the attention of Walgreens Pharmacy, and they followed me and they did a docuseries on me about how
Wow.
I did.
Well,
Yeah,
I didn't know about that.
I didn't
yeah,
either. I mean, I
yeah,
was following your journey
Yeah,
too,
I was
but I
I was
didn't.
yeah, I
Yeah.
saw you on Facebook sharing,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't
yeah.
know Walgreens did that.
Yeah, Walgreens did that, and that was a powerful moment. And again, it was telling my story, and there is a choice that we all can make. It's a choice. You can either go. I look at it this way: I want the most optimal outcomes possible. Pharmaceuticals will get you a result, but there's going to be some side effects with it.
Right.
Mhm.
But if I do the plant-based diet and let my food be my medicine, I can get all the benefits without the side effects. And that was the difference. But I had to make that choice and I had to make a commitment to that choice.
So let me ask you this. And I can speak for myself, and I'm quite sure that there are a lot of people like this. We're in an age right now where it's a hustle mentality. People are always busy. People have their day job, then they have two or three side hustles because they're trying to get ahead. They're trying to add to their bottom dollar. And then I know speaking for myself and probably a lot of people like me, we get very busy and we don't take time out to do what we know might be good for us.
Mhm.
And it's easy to say, well, think about it. Don't you want to be healthy? You've got to want to be healthy more than you want that bottom dollar. And it's easy to say those things, but how did you, because you said yourself you were always busy, you were always writing, and so you started to lead a sedentary lifestyle. What
Mhm.
was it? What is it that motivates you to get out there and exercise, knowing you still have twenty things you have to do? And
Sure.
knowing that, okay, I can take a 30 minutes to do this, but how do I convince myself to take 30 minutes to exercise?
So what I did is took the gift that God gave me of discipline, because to be a
Mhm.
writer requires a lot of discipline to sit down and actually get it done. So I transferred that discipline over into my physical activity. And I said, first and foremost, my health is non-negotiable, period. And
Mhm.
so every morning I get up literally between 4:30 and 5 a.m. and I get it in, no questions asked.
Mhm.
Even if I don't feel like I will run in the rain, I will run in the snow, I will go to the gym. I
Running in the
will
rain is very liberating, by the way.
Yeah, I will get up and I will do it. And I put it at the front of my day because it gets me going. It clears my mind. It gets me going. And I mix it up. I run, I bike, I swim, I do yoga, I do strength training. I'll go into a cardio class. I just mix it up just so that this body, stays healthy. But then when I think about it, when I was a teenager, I was a student athlete. I was navigating 7 or 8 classes a day, plus, being a student athlete and practicing, after school for track and field. So it wasn't that unfamiliar to me. I
Right.
just think that society tells us at a certain point, you got to grow up and you got to put that down and take this corporate job. And don't worry, we got good health care. And it's not really health care. We don't have a health care system in this country. We have a sick care system in this country
Mhm. It's true.
because because health, and what I look at, how I reframed my thinking, I say healthcare, my healthcare is my responsibility. When I go
Mhm.
see my doctor once a year for that physical, that's a report card letting me know how well I am taking care of me. Now, if he says, "Oh, this is off and this is off," he's not going to say, "Hey, I'm going to write you a prescription to go see this trainer where we're going to put you up this detailed healthcare plan to get you in the gym to lose some weight so you don't have to take the high blood pressure pills, the high cholesterol pills." Or he's not going to say that. The doctor's not going to say that. They're going to
Mhm.
say, "We'll make it easy for you. Take this pharmaceutical." That's what they're going to say.
Right.
Rank and file Western style medicine. They're not looking. When you become the patient that says, "Well, no, I want to, you know, I don't want to treat a symptom. I want to get rid of it."
Right.
And like, what's the root cause of it? And then it was simple. The root cause of it was just processed foods. There's sugar in everything. I mean, there's sugar in ketchup. That's nothing but sugar. They
Yeah.
will put sugar and hidden sugars in everything, and then they'll say no sugar, but they don't say no sweetener. There's difference. It's
I
It's
was
little.
very
really
surprised.
disingenuous. It's really,
Mhm.
really dishonest.
Well,
But
it is.
technically true, you know.
Well, no, I
Yeah.
was just gonna say I was very surprised because on Halloween I made apple cider and it was my first time making it. And I said, well, let me look up some recipes. And I looked up all these recipes and people are adding all of this sugar to it. And I decided I was going to make apple cider, but I didn't want to add sugar to it. So I took probably what 7 or 8 apples and I juiced them. And then I added a little water and then I put the spices into it and I tasted. I'm like, this is delicious. And I didn't put a drop of sugar in it. And then I was like, why are people putting sugar in this? They don't need it.
Yeah, because sugar is as addictive as cocaine.
Yeah.
Sugar is as addictive as cocaine, and there's money to be made off of it. And so that they sugars and cereals, they have it everywhere. They have sugar and dairy everywhere. It's a big industry, and the food industry is largely unregulated. So
Right.
Right.
people who eat Cheetos or plus you're eating styrofoam. But I won't go off on all of that. But I do a lot of times when I go and speak, when I tell people my age, they like, wow, you look great. I was like, it wasn't always like that. I had to learn because I'm 56 now, but I feel just absolutely amazing. I feel absolutely amazing. And it has, impacted my writing and what I do in that arena. And then also, because I have a day job, but then I also write, and then I also narrate, I also podcast. So this whole storytelling thing has been such a part of my life. It's like what my fingers are to my hand. It's like it's just in me. And I look at the whole journey of the diabetes and all of that as part of my journey, as part of telling my life story, as part of telling that story and letting that story influence and inspire others that, hey, there is another way if you're willing. Is it easy? No, it's not easy at all. And if it were easy, as they say, everyone would do it. But is it worth it? Absolutely. Especially when you don't have to take the pharmaceuticals and you can get up. The biggest thing that I noticed, I can get out of the bed now without groaning. I make them old man sound like,
You don't have to
yeah,
grunt anymore when you stand up and sit down and lie
yeah.
down.
I got to make sure my knee. I used to have to make sure my knees were there. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, yeah, there it is, there it is. But now when I get up in the morning, I get up and I stand up, and it's like, da, 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 da. you know, and it feels great. And then another thing that people sometimes say is like, "Oh, where do you find the time? I don't have the time to do it, I'm so busy." And what I say to that, I said, "Well, don't you know being physically active actually gives you more time? It's adding more time to your life. It's
Mhm.
adding more time to
True.
your time here." So I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I
No,
apologize.
no, that wasn't a tangent because
Not at
this
all.
is your
That
world. This
answered the
is your world.
question.
This interview is your world about you and what motivates you. And so that leads me to your latest release where you have a historical fiction book
Mhm.
that's set during the Spanish flu pandemic. And for people who don't know when that was, it was roughly 100 years before COVID. So what the book is called Lenny Gray, is that right? Okay.
Yes, Lenny
And
Gray.
so what led you to write about the Spanish flu pandemic? I don't know if I've heard about any other books, recent historical fiction with that as the basis for it.
So you will really like this. So Lenny Gray was inspired by my family. It's particularly my father's side. So I've always heard the story growing up that my father was the baby of 18 children. He says my parents had 18 kids together from Mississippi and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, what does that mean? I mean, like this poor woman had 18 kids. Like who does that? But they were living.
Back then they did, and especially in rural areas. My mother
Yeah,
was
Hmm.
one of 15, so that's
yeah,
and there were no twins. So
yeah, same here.
so her
So
mother really, God bless her, she didn't live that long though. She
yeah.
died when my mother was 18. But
Yeah,
Mm.
a lot of that is healthcare too.
a lot of that was
She had
healthcare too. Yeah.
hypertension and no real healthcare. So, but anyway,
So
continue.
I did some genealogy work, and I was doing genealogy work trying to see if the myths of the family were true. That myth, oh, we got Indian in us, and and I'm like, well, who had it? Well, such and such over here. And I'm like, well, who's it? Well, they was part of the Cherokee, Choctaw, Apache. I'm like, well, what happened to these people? So anyway, when I did the genealogy and I did the bio DNA thing, I came back to my father and said, they lied to you. Ain't a lick of Indian nowhere. I said, there's some English, there's some Dutch, and there's a whole lot of Irish. And so, but anyway, so I went on that journey. And in this country, when I did my research, I got back on my father's side of the family all the way back to 1817. And, so after that, the trail goes cold.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I interviewed his sister, who was old enough to be his mother. And through her, I was able to go back in time and look at, the history. And so then since I did not know my paternal grandparents, since they died before I did, long before I was born, I could only hear stories about the things that, they went through. So I'm thinking like, I have my grandfather, my paternal grandfather was born in 1896 and my
Mm.
grandmother was born in 1900. So historically, what they went through, the second coming of slavery, basically with Jim Crow, discrimination, living in a rural area, not having access to education, having to be sharecroppers and living in abject poverty. It's like, no, well, like, how did they survive? Like, what was, and to go through the pandemic and not have healthcare insurance, and you got to
Right.
rely on your own knowledge of roots and herbs or whatever it is to survive. So I went and I gathered all of that information and I said, there's a novel here. There's a novel here. So I
Mm.
took that story and I followed the family from the 1920s all the way up into the 1950s, up to the Great Migration. So I followed the
Okay.
family for 30 years. And so some of the information that I got from my aunt, what she could remember, I intermingled it into the story, but I also did a lot of research on the area. And then I sort of kind of put stuff together, said, well, this is probably what likely happened
Hmm.
during this time. And I created a story called Lenny Gray.
Now, who
And
is Lenny Gray? Is that
Lenny
just like a made up name
Lenny
or?
Gray was actually my grandmother's name. That was
Wow.
actually
Oh,
that was
okay.
a yeah. And so so because she was the matriarch, and everybody always talked, my aunts and uncles, well, Mama said this and Mama said that, and that sort of thing. And even my father never knew his father because he died when my father was just 5 years old. So,
Okay.
but all of his other brothers and sisters, knew, and Daddy used to make beer. That was one of the things they said. Daddy used to make beer, and I was
Okay.
like, okay, like what does that mean? He said, we drank beer all the time. I'm like, what do you mean you drank beer all the time? And like, well, we didn't have clean drinking water. They had
Right.
like pump water out of the ground that would come out of the
They
ground
do they have
and
a
go out.
well?
Right, and it would come out dirty, so they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't drink that. So Daddy would make beer, and everybody would drink beer. I was
That's a
Okay,
like,
thing.
interesting.
That's a
yeah.
thing. That's the reason why Belgians drink so much beer is because they went through the same thing. The water was not clean enough to drink, so they
Mhm.
would drink beer, and that was how they became famous for beer and why they have so many beers.
Right. And so once I learned that information, then I said, well, help me understand if you're drinking beer all the time, that's an alcohol. And then of course they're drinking that hooch, that moonshine too, they making
Mm-hmm.
that down there. I said, well, if the kids are drinking beer, I said, well, was your mother drinking beer during pregnancy? She said, yeah, mama drank all the time. I'm like, well, that's called fetal alcohol syndrome. You can't drink alcohol when but it's 1930. They didn't know.
Right. And back then, I think people were tougher.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I mean, they had less stresses, the stresses that we have, they didn't have those. And even though they had their own stresses, like, and I know what you're talking about. My parents and my grandparents, um, well, one side sharecrop, but my dad's side sharecrop. But my mother's side, they owned their land.
Mhm.
And then they lost it in the depression, and then they got another farm. So they were landowners. So some people did sharecropping. Sharecropping was basically one step up from slavery because you
Yep.
never got ahead.
Yep.
You always owed the man, the slave, the
The
plantation
landowner.
owner, but
Yeah.
they were probably descendants of the slave masters. You never got out of debt. And it was by design. So they basically had you tied to the land, working it, and you never got
Right.
out of debt.
Yeah, and that element is in the book too, along with the historical events that happened during their time. Like the Joe Louis Max Schmeling fight, that was a big thing, there were a couple of natural disasters that happened, during their time. There was a stock market crash that happened during their time. The
1929.
yeah,
Hmm.
during their
Hmm.
time, Gone with the Wind came out and people were like going crazy about for Gone with the Wind. And so I intermingled all of that into the story, and even the Harlem Renaissance. I intermingled, this explosion of the Black arts movement in the 1920s and 30s of,
Mm.
Black people creating literature at a high level. And so, again, I intermingled all of that in, I, and always one of the other things that I had fun intermingling in was superstition, because my family, they had some superstitions that you just would not believe. I mean, they would come up with some stuff and say, you don't want to do that, your left toe will fall off you.
Yeah,
And so
some of those superstitions crossed state and regional boundaries, and then I think some were more narrowly focused, like in the community or whatever. But I hear you, because I know my husband, he grew up in a rural area, um, very rural, and he said they grew up thinking black cats were just bad luck. And if a black cat passed cross your path, you had to find that cat and get it to cross the other way. Otherwise, you're just gonna have horrible luck. And he said, and they hardly ever went to school because he had to pick crops when he was a little boy. He said one morning a black cat crossed his path, and he was going through bushes and everything trying to find that cat. I mean, it sounds so absurd, but that they really believed it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it was raining, and he was going through the bushes trying to find that cat because they were, convinced that it was just bad luck. And a black
Oh,
cat is just like a yellow cat or a tabby. This is a cat. Just
yeah,
happens. But I
yeah.
don't know who. I wonder where that superstition came from.
I
Well,
don't know. There's
Well,
a
there
lot
are
of them
some
out there
still
though.
ones that are out, like bad things happen in threes, and I still say that to this day because my mother used to say it and her mother used to say it, and I don't know if it's true or not, but sometimes it seems like it is.
Yeah, yeah. And so again, there you go. There's a modern day superstition, or men in their football like, well, when I wear my football jersey, my team wins. Now
Uh,
there's no truth to that superstition whatsoever, but people believe. Yeah. And so we all have our superstitions. We
we
we, we
do.
even Stevie Wonder, very superstitious. Yeah.
Yeah, great song.
Yes.
And he had a lot of them in there. That comes in on my Pandora station sometimes. Really now, uh, I've heard it recently, and some of those, like, anyway, he has some amazing music, just some
Yeah.
really original stuff that was just amazing. So
Yes.
he really did.
Yeah, and so that was where the idea of Lenny Gray came from, and it was my first foray into historical fiction. And
Mhm.
so and it was fun doing the research and going back and actually looking at old newspapers and looking at what was happening, during that time, and then understanding that for me, I looked at it as those were the previous chapters of my DNA's history. And I look at it, I'm grateful for, all that they went through, to
Mhm.
survive so that I could
You could
live.
be here.
Because right, because my DNA could have been cut off at any point through, bad birth, war, famine, disease. Somebody could have gotten shot. So I
Yeah,
look at it as the resilience of the DNA. And in spite of all the things that they had to go through, there was still enough, to get me here. So I honor that. And I was like so happy to try to bring some of their story to life in some way, to show that struggle, and then to show the hope when they left Mississippi to come to Chicago for, better work and a better opportunity to, integrate into American society and not live as second class citizens. So, that's one of the things I'm proud of about Lenny Gray.
Wow, we could talk for
we
probably
could,
another
but we're
30
at the end
minutes
of our
about,
time.
yeah.
And it sounds like an amazing book, and historical fiction is my favorite genre. So it's a book I will be ordering.
Yes, yes, please, or download the audio drama. I mean the audiobook too,
Oh, yeah,
because
Do
it's an
you voice
audio
your own,
too.
do you
yeah,
narrate your own audiobooks?
yes. So I narrate them, but I went back and I expanded my storytelling ability just from writing to narrating. So I went back and I got some training on how to narrate audiobooks, because it's not just reading words. It's really about
Right.
understanding the author's intent and bringing the story to life, and understanding my vocal range and what I can do. So I've narrated about 20 something audiobooks now that include I narrated a memoir for a guy called Chasing Space who played for the Dallas Cowboys and then became an astronaut. I narrated a book for Donna Hill called Confessions in B Flat. And just
Okay,
recently,
I read that book.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
and just recently I narrated a book by an Emmy Award winning television producer named Jeffrey Blunt. He won an Emmy for Meet the Press and the Today Show. And so I
Okay.
narrated his book that just came out earlier this year, Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. If there's ever a book that
Amazing.
you want to read, I highly, highly recommend Mr. Jimmy from Around the Way. It is
Okay.
one incredible story, and I enjoyed bringing it to life so much. Matter of fact, when I finished the book, I was sad. I called the guy and I said, "You got to write another one. You know, you got to write a follow-up." I mean, it was just that incredibly good. And I'll say this one last thing. It's a story about a man who is a black man who is very wealthy, but he has a very public fall from grace. And instead of facing the music in this social media world, he decides to move to rural Mississippi and try to hide there. And when he goes there, he runs across a level of abject poverty that he didn't think existed in America. Now he has money and means to change the lives of people. But what he finds out is there are those who don't want to see the people in this particular community of Around the Way um, thrive. It's an amazing story.
I'm
Okay.
gonna
Well, we are
definitely.
three
I'm
minutes
an
behind
audiobook girl, so
time.
I'll be looking
She
for it.
is. But this has been really great, Earl. Great hearing your story and all the stories you're telling. And thanks
Thank,
so much for being a guest on the show.
thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. You guys
Thank
take care.
you. You have a great
Okay.
night. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, same here. Okay, goodbye, guys.
Okay.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
God bless you.